we're going to have a conversation today with 5 of your classmates who we've invited, who have no idea what we're going to talk about. You can maybe just maybe what we'll do is when you first speak, you can say something about, you'd say your name and say something about yourselves, okay, each one of you. And we've got 4 or 5 questions, and you're not going to answer, everyone isn't going to answer each question. We're not going to go down the line. You just want to answer the questions as best that you can and from what you're thinking about, okay? And all right, Lily, you can just hit the next button and we will move. So what we're going to talk about is 9/11. And I was thinking that we really should, this is an event that shaped so many things in the world. The way that we typically define terrorism, it's the most damaging terrorist event in human history. More lives were lost, more people were harmed and injured, more property damage than any single event in human history. The way we define terrorism, meaning that violence that's perpetrated by non-state actors for political purposes, right? Because if we want to look at state actors, there have been other events in history that are much more damaging in so many levels, but this is just profound. And the long-standing impact over the past 20 years has been just, all of you just grew up with 9/11. There are a few of you who are young when it happened, who are a little bit older, but mostly you just grew up with this. So what I'd like to do today is just learn what it is that you all know. Because I realize as an instructor, I can only learn from people in the classroom, and it's really important to hear from you all. And I want to hear from you what you know and what you think. So the first question that we're going to ask, and I'll just read these to you if you can see them, but so what have you learned about 9/11 from your schooling, from your parents, your teachers, your community, from your own research? Like, what do you know about 9/11? And with all these questions, there's no right answer, okay? But there's just, what do you know? Just walk us through, right? Lexi, you want to start?
So, hi all, my name's Lexi Wells. I'm a junior from South Jersey. My major is Management Information Systems. So from what I know or learned about 9/11 was that it was something that's definitely tragic that happened to our country. Some personal family friends have been affected from it. Like some of my close family friends, they lost their father during 9/11. My aunt was in New York during 9/11.
Your mom was what?
My aunt was in New York on 9/11 for her job, and she's still affected by that to this day. But I also know that 9/11 has perpetuated a lot of stereotypes against Black and brown people in the country. And that is also harmed people from the Middle East as well, because they're perpetuated as terrorists when that's not the case. So that's what I've learned so far from it.
Okay. All right. Who wants to go next?
Hi, I'm Halima. I'm Pakistani, but I lived in Massachusetts. I was born here, and my parents were in New York actually when 9/11 happened. They weren't anywhere near Twin Towers, thank God, but they were in New York. I was also born in New York. What I know about 9/11 is I think that people in America and people in this country and in the world in general tend to see people's differences very easily. So I think that as Muslims in America, we were people that others saw as different. And as soon as 9/11 happened, there was now like a label to put on us. Like we were now terrorists, we were now towel heads, we were different than other people. And this effect has had there's so many negative effects to this day. Like Muslims like me, and I don't wear the hijab, but people who do wear the hijab and who are more prominently and apparently Muslim experience Islamophobia every day of their lives.
So does your mom cover?
No, she doesn't. My grandmother does.
So were your parents born in Pakistan?
Yes.
Okay. Have you been there, by the way?
Yeah, I've only visited once though.
Uh-huh. Okay. So, all right. This is a good start. I'm not going to ask follow-up questions until who wants to go next? Mo.
Hello, my name is Mohammed Mansi. I am from Saudi Arabia, and I'm a sophomore. I'm doing chemical engineering. And I guess what I know about 9/11 is that it was absolutely terrifying for U.S. citizens and for the whole world. Speaking like my grandpa was actually here in the U.S. by the time that 9/11 happened, and from his stories I can tell how the way people treat him was differently right after that day or right after or that week in specific. It was actually followed by a couple of bombings that happened back home in Saudi Arabia post 9/11 and before 9/11. So it was terrifying. It generated a lot of stereotypes about Muslims in general or Saudis in specific. And it hurt us and it terrifies us in a two-way. It's a two-sided thing. For the first part, because we were of course afraid for the U.S., which is a key partner to our country, and as well as the bombings that happened in our country from the same terrorist group. And from the other side, it was also it generated a stereotype. So we were worried that the other or our social image would be different for the rest in front of the rest of the world. So
Okay. All right.
yeah, it was really heavy.
Yeah, so I have I'll have some questions for you in a minute. All right, who wants to go
Thank you.
next?
Hi, so I'm Jazzy. I'm from New York.
New York City?
Yeah, no, Long Island, but I'm
Oh.
like 20 minutes from the city.
All right.
And my dad's Persian, so he's actually born in Iran. My mom's Egyptian. So after 9/11, I definitely saw how people treated my dad and how things changed.
Wait, but you're Jewish, right?
I'm Jewish, yeah,
Okay.
both parents.
All right, okay.
So I definitely saw how stuff changed after 9/11, and how people were treating people from the Middle East. And I know a lot of people that were affected by 9/11. Like being from New York, a lot of people worked in the city. My dad was in the city when it happened.
Uh-huh.
So it really hits home. Because I think at least 30 kids just in my school were affected by their parents, their aunts, their uncles. So it's really,
When you say affected, meaning they worked in the towers?
yeah,
or
they
in
worked in the towers.
Yeah, okay. Do you have people from your school whose parents
Yeah,
or grandparents died?
yeah.
Okay. All right, again, I have a couple questions for you, but let's go with Taylor.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I'm a senior. I'm a digital and print journalism major, and I'm from Maryland. Thankfully, I don't have as awful of connections to 9/11 as the
But-
rest of them.
So
do.
I'm gonna stop you though for a second. So go right back to the question. What have you learned about it from school? And you're a journalism major, so this is big for you, right?
Yeah.
What have you? Uh-huh.
So in school, we never really learned about it. Everything that I know about 9/11 is either through documentaries that I've seen or from what my parents have told me. My mom, she kind of tells me more about it, kind of just about how scared she was that day, how she had to go home and pick me up, and that there was no one on the roads, how she could see the smoke from the Pentagon from where she worked. So it was kind of just a really scary time for a lot of people. And I know that it caused 2 wars that probably didn't actually need to happen. A lot of death on both sides, not just on the American side, but also in the Middle East. And it's caused a lot of turmoil and a lot of strife in the Middle East as well, over a war that's kind of hard to define because you can't fight an ideology like that, especially in an area that you have no connections to.
So okay. So let me go back to Mohammed. Let me go back to you, right? What do they teach in Saudi Arabia? What did you learn in school about 9/11? You did your high school in Saudi, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think there was much of a focus on what happened on 9/11 in specific, but I think what our schools focused on was the anti-radicalism movement for Islam in specific.
So they focused on the growth of radical Islamic ideology.
Exactly.
And what, just educating you to secularize you, to not radicalize you, to like what? To combat that, you mean?
I don't think that was the case. It was pretty much taking me back to the roots of my religion,
Got you.
of Islam, and how peaceful and loving of a religion it is.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, which is kind of like that. Like, so really focusing on the religious side, not the...
Exactly.
So do you remember, like, have you watched videos?
I have.
Yeah.
I've seen all the videos of 9/11.
But you didn't like see those in school or anything?
No, we don't, like in schools back home. We don't really focus on the events as much
Yeah.
as the ideology that goes behind
Yep.
that.
Yep, got you. Halima, how about you? Like, what did you, Mo? What'd you learn? What'd you learn in school?
So I went to school in Massachusetts, and while I think we did talk about 9/11, I think it was mostly only on that one day of a year. You know, when we had the moment in silence, we did talk about the tragedy and the lives that were lost. And there's one thing that I have noticed that's happened a lot in my classes is that whenever people are talking about 9/11 and they are talking about these terrorist attacks, they call these people Islamic terrorists. And like that's something that has bothered me like all these years in school, because honestly, these people do not represent Islam in any way, shape, or form. But there's always been this focus on calling it Islamic terrorism. And there's been so many other events that have happened, so many other tragedies that have happened where people who aren't black and brown weren't labeled as terrorists for committing those same acts of violence.
So for you, as someone who is Muslim, for you, one of the things that you've really zeroed in on and focused on was the ways in which you and other Muslims have been portrayed in particular ways, like things that maybe somebody like Lexi Lexi, you may mention to it, right? But maybe somebody else wouldn't pay attention to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so do your teachers talk about like on the anniversary of 9/11? Do you remember? Did people talk about it?
Yeah, we would talk about it, but I think that it was a little different from the way like Muhammad was talking about. I think we focused a little more on the tragedy than we did about the ideology and the after effects in class. I think, which is important, you know, there were so many lives that were lost that day. It is very important to talk about that tragedy and the lives that were impacted. But I think there were many lives that were impacted in many different ways. Yeah, I think we should focus on all of those different ways.
Well, the issue is, I think what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say, and what I'm hearing Muhammad say is that actually the radicalization that led to this is actually quite problematic and something that is much bigger, much more massive, and potentially much more deadly over the long run. Hey, can we go to the next slide, actually? Lily, next one. Hey, so what are I'm going to start, let's go back to Lexi, right? What's your most pressing questions about 9/11? Think about it.
My most pressing question about 9/11.
Yeah, like what are some questions that you like really just wonder about that just are in your mind?
I wonder why a lot of the school systems, I mean, I feel like I kind of know the answer already, but just to think out loud, I wonder why the American school system, I can't speak for everyone's experience about learning about 9/11, how they covered not about the after effects of it, like Helena just mentioned.
How it's not, it's been 20 years of impact. Or how about what led up to 9/11? What do you know about that? the 20 years before 9/11. You can just leave the mics on because it won't go. How about that? What do you know about that?
I really don't know much about that.
Uh-huh.
What I do know is that apparently there was like a lot of planning for the attack from those terrorists. But other than that, like the 20 years before 9/11, I'm not educated on how, the U.S. and Middle Eastern relationship was.
Okay, that's pretty big. And Jasmine, how about you? What are some of your most pressing questions?
I think Lexia actually had a good question. Just like the effects, why aren't the effects of 9/11 talked about in school systems? I really didn't have other questions other than that.
Okay, and when you say effects, can you give me
How
an
it
example?
affects Middle Eastern people too. Like we talk a lot about like the tragedy and how it affected us in the U.S., but we don't talk about how it affects Middle Eastern people living in the U.S. that much.
How about you as someone who's Jewish? Like, what questions do you have as a person who's Jewish?
Not much really. It's kind of just, I feel like a lot of people ask me, no one can really tell where I'm from until I tell them. And then when I tell them, they're like, oh, so you're Muslim. And I'm like, no, I'm Jewish. And they're like, oh, okay. As if it's like a relief, which I don't understand. Because I feel like there's a lot of negative stereotype around Muslim because of 9/11, all that stuff, when there shouldn't be. And I feel like that's kind of what needs to be talked about as well in schools.
And why, when you say there shouldn't be, what do you mean there shouldn't be?
Because you can't really generalize a whole, because of something that happened, you can't generalize a whole population of people because of that.
Yeah, okay. Although we do, human beings do that. Like, nobody in this classroom loves Michigan. You're at Penn State, you just hate Michigan or Ohio State because you just do. And there's no, we do that. But I hear you. Yeah. And I think you're raising a good question. Mo, how about you? What question do you have about 9/11 that you would want to ask?
I wonder if the people who did it thought about the consequences that would happen after it. Especially how negatively, let's say they're radical, Islam, supporters or something. I wonder how they thought that would have supported Islam.
Okay, I got you. Okay, so listen, let me ask you first off, let me ask you a question. Have you ever met a radical Muslim?
No.
How many Muslims have you met in your life?
I grew up in, I went to a religious high school in Saudi Arabia, and I don't ever think that I've come across a radical, very radical Muslim, because obviously those people, especially back home, they get traced back and they get sent to prisons or.
Halima, how about you? As a Muslim, have you ever met a radical Muslim?
So I actually went to Islamic school until 4th grade. So I never met anyone that was a radical, someone with those kinds of points of views. But I did meet a lot of very conservative Muslims in my life. I still know a lot of them. And even the most conservative Muslim that I know has no views that are anywhere near, what these terrorist organizations claim to call Islam.
What's a pressing question that you have? So Muhammad's was a really good question. See, Mo, you got me now because you said you usually go by Mo, and you can't shorten Muhammad's name. You know what I mean? I'm you're setting me up for hate. You know what I mean? Come on. Anyway, it's very funny, by the way. Halima, what's a pressing question that you have?
This is kind of related to the schooling thing that they were talking about. And also I think it's kind of related to when we were talking about critical race theory a few weeks back in class. But I wonder why we try to shield children in this country from violence and from realistic things that happen to people in everyday life. I've experienced minor aggressions relating to Islamophobia ever since I was young. But so many people are very against educating children and teaching about these things in school, when people like me don't have a choice. Like, we don't get to we don't get to shield ourselves from these realities. So why do white children get to do that?
So you don't get to. Although, other people, it just depends on where you're at, right? So like Jasmine, how about you being Jewish? Because there's a lot of anti-Semitism in the world still. It's different on Long Island, right? But
It's different because I'm from Long Island and 90% of people are Jewish.
yeah.
So it's
Yeah, exactly. No, but still, like, what's your take on that? There's so much anti-Semitism, right? Like, it's really on the rise. It's profound, actually.
Obviously it's awful. Being from Long Island and being that my town is mainly Jewish, there's really not a lot of Jewish hate in my community. Of course, I see it all on social media and I see all the stuff that happens. But when I tell people I'm Jewish, it's more like, oh, that's so cool because you're from Iran and Egypt. Like, I've never heard of that before. I've never experienced any like sort of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, you just haven't. Cool.
Yeah.
And I think that, Halima, I want to come back to, you took a couple stories in a second, but Taylor, how about, what's your most pressing question about 9/11?
I think you kind of mentioned it a little bit before, but I kind of have questions about the before more than the after, because I think a lot of people don't know that the United States actually had a lot of influence in what led up to 9/11 with the training and funding of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan and the Soviet invasion. And that literally directly correlates to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden forming Al-Qaeda. So I think I'm interested to know why I'm interested to know why the American education system only focuses on the event itself and not the before and the after effects.
All right, man. So you just, yeah. Okay, so I want to ask the class. Hey, by the way, you know what? I want to ask the class. How many of you know what she's talking about, what she just said? How many of you know? Raise your hands really high if you know what she's referring to. So, okay, it looks like less than 5% of the class for sure. Hang on a sec. And you want to be you're a journalism person? Hey, can I just can I take that? Hey, Jeff, can you turn the volume down on the stream for just a second? Hey. Do you mind if I ask you a question? Are you cool? You raised your hand when I said, "Hey, does anyone know what Taylor's talking about?" And you were like, "Yeah." What do you? Can you just say a couple more things about what she was saying?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about it, but I know that the Soviets were invading Afghanistan back in, I think it was the 80s, maybe, or the 90s. I think it was the 80s. And that the U.S. funded and armed a group called the Mujahideen, and I believe Osama bin Laden was a member of the Mujahideen,
and what's it lead you to say? Like, what's your conclusion about that?
Not as much of a conclusion as much as like this is part of the little bit that I know.
Just questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I know that I remember seeing earlier this year there was a tweet with an old picture of like a newspaper article that said, a U.S. newspaper article that had like this brave mujahideen, leader Osama bin Laden talking about him fighting against the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan at the time.
Okay.
That's all.
All right, cool. Dude, awesome. So, like, what's really interesting, can anybody else, Lexi, can you go any further with this at all?
Go any further about what happened?
What we're talking about, like what happened before 9/11. Do you have any thoughts? Questions, like, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, what happened?
I guess the question that formed when I was listening to Taylor and her information that she provided would be, like, what training aided those terrorists to be able to like attack our country? Because I was uneducated about that. The U.S. had direct relations with training in that instance. So I was unaware of that. So that's a question that stemmed based off of what I just learned right now.
Okay. All right. Mo, do you talk about this back in Saudi at all? Because 15 of the 19, there were supposed to be 20. There were 19, 15 of them were Saudis. So do you guys talk about what led up to that, their radicalization? Or?
I think what started it all was the war between the U.S., or at least what I know is that it was the war between the U.S. and the Soviet Union that happened in Afghanistan, and how both governments were supporting the Afghans in war against the Soviet Union, and then some of them were children, and there were children with weapons, and no schools were available or anything. That's why they only saw weapons, and they saw a chance to do what they had done.
Mm-hmm. The terrorists.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So right. So we've already agreed, or you've already said that neither of you have ever met a radical Muslim. I never have either. I mean, I've met thousands of Muslims. I've never met anyone who was radicalized, who at least admitted to it. And I don't know. I just haven't. So it's not been part of my reality. So it's kind of like here, how many of you in the classroom who are Christians have met a radical Christian who thinks it's really a good idea to destroy the government, and would have if they had a chance, they really would destroy the government, dude. They would do that. How many have met a radical Christian who would do that? Who's ready to do that? One? Anybody else? Okay, so it's very similar, right? Do you have anything else to add?
Not really.
Okay. Halima, do you have anything to add? Do you know, what happened?
Yeah, I did, and I actually had to find that out for myself too, because they didn't really teach about that in schools. But I do remember a couple years back, I read a little bit about that, how the U.S. government encouraged creating these groups to help them fight their war, and how they ended up, going rogue and becoming what we know as the terrorist organizations today.
So one of the things that's really, these things are always really complicated, right? Life is complicated, history is complicated, but there are a lot of things that events lead to other events, okay? And so when you pick a single thing out and focus on it, you say, well, what happened to precede that? Or what happened? It's sort of like the police when you get into an altercation here in State College, where the police don't just show up and ask you. They want to be like, well, what happened before that? And then what happened? And then what happened? And you're always trying to find it, right? And there are a lot of people on the left here in the United States who are, really looking at every opportunity to criticize the United States, right? And bring it back home, because, people who are Americans, but still, you just want to critique everything. And there are other people who have the idea that, well, but you're gonna wrap ourselves in the flag, and this is really important, and doesn't matter. Of course we do wrong, and that's okay, because we're defending ourselves and we're doing whatever it is we're doing, and that's important. But neither of those approaches are really a place where you want to plant your feet very firmly, because you want to be a thoughtful thinker, right? So I'm gonna go through this. So Taylor, you brought it up, so I'm gonna just go a little further with it. So Lily, if you can go to that one slide. So if we go back in the post-World War II period, the world was divided between the U.S. and the USSR, the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics. Fundamentally, the first world, the second world, the eagle and the bear. And we were fighting it out. The Soviet Union called themselves the communist nation. We were capitalists. They were the communist bloc. We were the capitalist democratic bloc, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever those things mean, but that basically is it right there. The West is in the blue, and the red is the Soviet Union, and we were just fighting it out all over the place. And all in Africa, we're fighting it out. In the Middle East, we're fighting it out. And the Soviets are arming people, and we're arming people, and we're just have these proxy wars going on where we're just they want to take over the world, we want to take over the world, we want the whole world to follow us, they want the whole world to follow them. They're militarized, we're spending far too much money, in my humble opinion, but who am I? Much money on weapons of war, and we're distributing those weapons around the world, and we're just fighting it out with each other. Okay, next slide. That's the starting point. And so in 1979, the Afghan government had become socialist. They elected a socialist communist government, and things were going wrong. And so the Soviet Union had been supporting them economically and militarily, and so they invaded Afghanistan in 1979. And the United States said, hey, this is a really good opportunity to weaken the Soviet Union, like our arch enemies, right? We're going to weaken them. And so the way we're going to do it is we're going to support the people who are fighting against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. And so these became the sort of beginning stages of what's called the Mujahideen. And the Mujahideen are people who are warriors. There are a couple ways to see it, but warriors who are fighting for the survival and expansion of Islam. Okay, so here's Soviet tanks rolling in. Next slide. We arm them with lots of weapons. And this is the Mujahideen in the White House with Ronald Reagan. That's Reagan in the back there in the black suit, right? We arm them with weapons, lots of weapons, because we want to give them whatever weapons they need to defeat the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is our enemies. And by the way, don't check out on me here, right? Don't listen to this, because this is like, I'm going to complexify life here really fast. So we give them lots of weapons, including, go ahead, next slide, right? Including missile. This is a Stinger missile. These are like surface-to-air missiles. These things shoot down aircraft and helicopters. So these are like, you don't put these out among terrorists. Like, you just don't do that, but we did. So we gave the Mujahideen Stingers. Here's, next slide. This is a civilian aircraft in Afghanistan that was shot down by the Mujahideen with one of these Stinger missiles. So these are the kinds of things, if you put out, they're going to come back and get you, right? Next slide. So Osama bin Laden emerged out of this Mujahideen movement. He was one of the leaders. So all of his early training and all of his early organization with the Mujahideen, building up all of these folks, these radical Islamists, he played a primary role in this, and he and others like him are the ones who we gave lots of weapons to fight our arch enemies. But what happened was, go ahead to the next slide. What happened was, eventually, they take over in Afghanistan. They become the Taliban, right? So it's like, oh my God. So this is the thing. When you play with weapons of war, and Taylor, this is what you're getting at. When you play with weapons of war, the weapons are going to come back and kill lots of people. In the end, Osama bin Laden is the person who played the primary role in orchestrating the attacks in 9/11. So the same person who years earlier we're holding up, giving weapons to, doing the things, like this is what you do, this societies do, but if you play by war, if you play by violence, the violence is going to come in multiple directions. It's just how it is. That's how life is. And so in this particular case, it came back. Now, that's not to say that we caused 9/11. That's not to say the United States wanted 9/11. It's not to say any of that. It's to say that an unintended consequence of supporting war over a period of time is it's going to come back and attack you. Like if you have a really vicious, violent dog, you never can fully trust that vicious, violent dog because you train that dog to be a killer, and that dog could turn on you at any moment. And so this is part of this thing that we're dealing with. And so, Taylor, you're asking, why don't we talk about this? Because that's over and that's in the past. But the question is, what about the next time? Maybe if we talked about this, maybe then we would, the next time this is about to happen, maybe we would figure out not to go down that route. You see, like, you look in the past to understand the future. Did you have a comment, bro?
Yes, Prince Bandar bin Sultan was the Saudi ambassador of the Saudi embassy at the United States at the time. And in one of his interviews, he said something really interesting that really sparked an idea in my mind. He said that if after winning the war, we had stayed there and spent like another $100 million or something, and spent like 2 years after that, took these weapons and built schools and hospitals and made a civilization over there, 9/11 might not have even happened.
Things could be different. Like, we don't know. But, and mind you, this isn't, what I'm talking about is, what I'm saying, and I think what Taylor, you were saying, this, and Taylor, I want you to respond to what I'm saying now, if you could, in a second. So, it's not anti-American at all, and it's not anti-military, and it's understanding. You want to have a deeper understanding. So Taylor, what I just said, is that kind of along the lines of some things that you have learned?
Yeah, I would say that just being able to understand things helps you learn from those mistakes, because you're never gonna be able to like learn if you don't know what to learn from.
Yeah. Yeah, you won't know.
So I just wanted to ask, right? We hear about how like they turned, right? Why did they turn on the U.S.?
Why did what?
Why did Osama bin Laden and the Taliban turn?
Yeah.
What caused them to,
Well, they were never our allies, right? We needed someone to fight a war. They were willing to fight the war. They said, give us weapons, we'll fight the war for you, but we're not on your side. In the end, they very quickly turned on us because they didn't want any foreigners inside of Muslim countries. So they were like, these are really radicalized people. So they're like, you're going to get out. Now we'll come after you. And people knew that. I mean, but the need to fight the communist countries was so great that we were willing to do something that we didn't want to do. It's like you all, the kinds of things you do sometimes when you don't wear a mask. The need to do this thing, I'll take a risk of getting COVID, but I'm not going to wear a mask in this moment because I need something else. Lexi, yeah, go ahead.
Mine is less of a question, but more of a comment, like a generalized idea that's sparked by this conversation. So, has it ever occurred to anyone that white supremacy, global white supremacy, was the foundation of a lot of wars and led to 9/11? Because if you think about it, the U.S. is a white country, the Soviet Union's a white country. They're fighting a war in a Middle Eastern country, and then when that next step was taken for a small minority group of those who are radicalized, Muslims,
yeah,
now they're the forefront of terrorism from something that white supremacy caused.
Yeah, that a certain sense of...
And that negative stereotype that's perpetuated upon them is because of white supremacy, which is also what we see in places like Africa. Saying how, not trying to flip it, take the attention off what we're talking about, but saying how black people are so enraged and aggressive. Yeah. But it's because of the aggression of white supremacy that had African Americans come to the country,
Yeah.
we're only focused on the people. So that comes to like, people are focusing on how there's a reaction, but they're not focusing on what caused that reaction.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, exactly. So it kind of goes back to remember the critical race theory class? It's like, remember when I did the stairs and you're like climbing up the stairs and at some point you got to look backwards and say, wait, how do we get so unequal? And by the way, the moment you start saying white supremacy, I know there are like eyes that glaze over because like, oh shit, here we go. Here's a black woman talking about white supremacy.
But
and
it makes
like,
sense though.
Yeah. What's that?
It makes sense.
No, it does. And so what I want to say to folks is there are a lot of words out there right now in particular that are kind of like buzzwords, and they seem like they're used a lot with people on the left, and people, so like a lot of people just kind of shut down to them. But there's a way of understanding this thing called white supremacy that you don't have to be a radical leftist. You can be a really thoughtful, middle-of-the-road thinker and still use the term in a way that makes a lot of sense. And so, but it's like what we were doing with critical race theory. It's like if you don't look in the past to understand how things got to be as unequal as they were, then you can't understand why we're not more equal today. Because everything in the past affects today. So this example, these folks right here, the Mujahideen, the Taliban, you cannot understand the Taliban if you don't understand where they came from and how they got supported and why they exist, because they just would have not existed, or there would be just these small isolated groups of people in Pakistan, for example, right? Because they really very much emerged out of also in Pakistan. Halima, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that, okay, so a lot of this reminds me of, a lot of stuff that I've read about selective empathy, and I feel like a lot of the times we focus so much on the suffering of people or areas that, like these white countries that we know as, like, okay, how do I explain this? I think it was last year or the year before, there was a fire in Notre Dame in Paris where the building burned down, and it gained so much media attention. You couldn't go on the news without seeing something about it. I think worldwide we ended up raising about $1 billion for this burning building, which of course was really important for a whole group of people. But then at the same time, we don't know very valuable things about, what happened in Afghanistan, what could have caused things such as 9/11.
Yeah.
We don't know about the after effects of all this. We don't talk about the suffering of people in Afghanistan enough. We don't talk about the suffering of, terrorist attacks in Egypt and Somalia that had so many lives lost. I think in 2018, there was a terrorist attack in Egypt that was labeled as one of the most deadly attacks in the most recent years. And I didn't even know about that until, I read an article about selective empathy. So we don't talk about these things enough. We focus so much on white suffering. We focus so much on the suffering of things and people that, we view as more. And there's this cloud of indifference around black and brown suffering.
Well, here, let me say this. Actually, I would disagree with you a little bit in the sense, right? I think that we don't. Yes, you're right. There's a way. First off, it's just really difficult to focus on anything that happens outside of your own small world. It's like jazz. It's like Long Island, right? It's like you're in this Jewish community in Long Island, and I'm like, well, get out of Long Island. Let me bring you out of Long Island, and let me take you somewhere else and show you the amount of anti-Semitism, the things that Jewish people are experiencing, not in Long Island, but in other places, right? But you're in Long Island, so it's where you live, right? So you have that. So I think that it's really, most people just are focused on the things that really affect them or that they can see. You can't see things on the other side of the world, right? So, Halima, that's why it's important in a class like this to have conversations with other people from other countries to hear the kinds of things that hear other things that are happening, right? And I think that, like, we talk a lot about. Yeah. So anyway, that's what I do. It doesn't. You don't. There's no like this isn't about a standard like who suffers more or who this or who that. Here, can you go to the next slide? I want to show you this. So I've been really involved. So for a hot minute, I was the faculty advisor to one of our returning veterans organization of returning vets coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And look at 1 million U.S. troops deployed to Afghanistan. About a third have some degree of recognized disability. I met one of them at the local marijuana dispensary on Saturday when I was in there, and a former student of mine who is a disabled veteran, and a third, you all. So what is that? I support our troops. What do you mean you support the troops? What do you do to support the troops? What have you done? Do you even know that a third of the vets have come back with some kind of recognizable disability? That's over 300,000. How do you support the troops if you don't know that? And then we can go to the next slide. So 100,000 Afghan civilians or soldiers have died. This is before last year. And 2,350, almost 2,400 U.S. citizens have died in Afghanistan. It's this is big, right? Because these are people, including a former student of mine who is in this classroom, died in Afghanistan. So I'm really connected to it. So Halima, I definitely hear what you're saying. I just think it's hard for people to get beyond that because we don't see it until it comes home. And a lot of these American soldiers are black and brown. These aren't just white people. A highly disproportionate number of them are black and brown. So anyway, can you respond to what I'm saying about that?
No, I definitely agree. There's no way that we can, know about and do things for every single tragedy that happens across the whole world. That's really just honestly impossible. But I just wanted to call attention to the fact that I think the media and I think the U.S. in general focuses a little bit more on white pain, and there's this weird man-made border between us and them. And I think that we just have to focus on which tragedies we give more attention to. For example, the Puerto Rico is part of the U.S. Puerto Rican people.
It's just you have to know people, right? So you just have to know somebody, and so I think that's the thing. If people don't know, they don't have any idea. So it's if they don't know, the individual we've heard about anti-Muslim actions after 9/11, but if you don't know somebody here, then you can't connect to it. Hey, Jeff, can you turn your chairs around? We're ready for Boston. Hey, can you all turn your chairs around? And let me see. So I want to bring a guest in. You might have to move a little bit closer together. And which I think a guest that in some ways is very. What's that? Oh, he's not? All right. Hang on a second. Hold on. All right. Hey, so do you have something to say about what I just said about connecting to people? About anti-Semitism, for example, right?
I think you were right. I feel if you don't know someone, you wouldn't really know about stuff that's going on. A lot of my friends know about these stereotypes against Middle Eastern people because of me, and stories about stuff that's happened to my dad. And I feel I definitely do agree with Halima, though. I think we need to focus more on stuff that happens around the world and not just on white in general. I'm not sure that I would say that we need to do that.
I'm not sure that we need to do that, and I'm not saying that. I just think that we do and we don't do. I'm just understanding the reasons why we don't do it or we do it, right? And so, for me, I don't think any of us should feel obligated, but I just think we become better people when we do.
Right.
Like if I can use the word, if I as a white person can use that word white supremacy and not bristle by it and actually understand some really thoughtful thinking behind it, that's a good thing. But if I just accept it because someone said it and I should accept it, then that's not a good thing. Like think it through, like be careful with it. Bro. So there he is. Bassem, how are you? Wait, hang on. I don't think he hears us. Hey, you all remember Bassem from the class that we did? So Bassem is currently, let's find out where he is. Hang on. If you don't know who Bassem is, you will be watching a lecture for the class that we missed. And you will in a hot minute. There we go. Bassem. Yeah, he doesn't hear us.
So anyway, can you respond to what I'm saying about that? Like this?
No, I definitely agree. There is no way that we.
Wait, hey, Bassem, can you hear us? Yo, what's... Huh? Hang on. Hold on, everybody.
Can know about and do things for every single person that happens. I mean, I've seen it too back.
Hold on a second. Hey, Bassem. Yeah, hey, you're here. We just can't hear you. Can you hear? You can't hear us? Do you hear us? Okay, you're on. Is your mic unmuted? You hear me now, but can you hear me through the system, through Zoom? I hear you in my phone, but I don't hear you in our system.
I can't hear you.
There you go. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, something wrong with my.
Yeah, you got me? All right, hang on. So, my question, when Bassem comes on, I want to ask a couple of questions. So, Bassem is did you watch the lecture? You got it? You know who he is? Okay. Bassem is a person, for those who don't know. Bassem is a friend of mine. He's Iraqi. He is a person who watched a talk that I gave on empathy in Iraq and reached out to me and ultimately started speaking in class. And whoa.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, we're well. Yeah, hang on. We're going to see if we can fix it. Hey, we're well, Bassem. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Hey, so have you been listening to the conversation?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, what jumps out for you?
Well, in 2018, when I first visited the United States, I went and visited the 9/11 Memorial. And my first impression was, wow. The amount of, you can feel death. I can smell death. I had my friend Azmat with me, and it was devastating. So I went back to myself when I heard about the 9/11 attacks. I was at my pharmacy. It was around 5 p.m. in Mosul, Iraq. And my friend, my TV wasn't working, so my friend came to me. He said, Bassem, come over, something is happening in New York. So I saw the second airplane hit, and then I was really shocked. And I turned around to him and I said, his name was Mohammed. I said, Mohammed, wait, we will pay for this.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah. So 9/11 changed the world. 3,000 innocent lives were lost. On the other side of the world, hundreds of thousands lost their lives in Afghanistan. Over 200,000 lost their lives in Iraq. I can speak for Iraq as an Iraqi. I'm not vowing for Saddam Hussein or his regime, but Iraq had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. But the 9/11 was taken as an excuse to attack Iraq and to topple the regime in Iraq. And since 2003, we have been paying the toll of that war. And me personally, I lost 4 members of my family as a consequence of that war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey, Bassem, when you talk about how Iraqis, can you go back to that day and how did Iraqis respond, or how did people in the Middle East respond to the to 9/11 attacks? Like, what did you see?
It was shocking. It was shocking. I mean, how could 3 airplanes go past the security of the United States and do what they did? It was shocking. Everybody was sad about what happened, but everybody wasn't weary. Well, they were weary of what's coming after it. Many people were just like me. They were thinking we will be targeted because of that attack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey, so I want to ask Halima and Muhammad, as Muslims, how do you feel being Muslims in the attack, right? This committed, these attacks were committed by Muslims in the name of Allah. But I mean, I know what you already said earlier, but how is it for you as Muslims to know that these people did that in the name of your religion?
Like I said, it was like knowing that they did it in the name of Allah was something that terrified us even more. Like we were terrified from the attack by itself, and then we were terrified that it was done in the name of Allah.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why why we were terrified that it was by the name of Allah was that because this really doesn't really doesn't represent how we practice our religion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that false image did nothing but bad to the
mm-hmm.
whole Islamic society.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I was wondering in the beginning of this lecture why how did they think that this would help Islam?
Yeah, this would move Islam forward, right?
Yeah.
1.2 billion Muslims in the world, right?
Exactly.
And how 15 people and other people who enabled them could have such a profound impact. Halima, do you feel any sense of guilt or responsibility or as a Muslim?
No, so I've never felt any guilt for 9/11 because, well, they're the 3 Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And I don't think people realize how similar they are.
Mm-hmm,
If you go back and if you read, the text for all 3 of these religions,
mm-hmm.
at the core, they are very, very similar. Yet for some reason, because of, these terrorist attacks, Islam, at least right now, is the only one that is being labeled as this radical, terrorist religion. Mm-hmm. And at its core, Islam, by definition, literally means peace. Yeah. Anyone that, opens the Quran and even tries to look at what Islam is will know immediately that has nothing to do with these attacks.
Yeah, yeah. I do a class. I'll do a class comparing Islam and Christianity in a way. Hey, Bassem, how about you? Do you, when you think about that? I asked that question purposely. Do you feel to Muhammad and Halima? Do you feel a sense of responsibility or whatever? A sense of responsibility or guilt? Hang on, I'll stand here in the camera so you can see me. What's your response to that as a Muslim?
Well, Islam was tarnished by these acts of terrorism. Muslims were the biggest losers of these kind of terrorist acts. So for me, I don't feel any guilt because the people who committed these acts do not represent me or my religion. So no, I don't feel any guilt. Just like as you, I can't blame you for what happened to me because you have nothing to do with what happened to me. So I cannot blame you for that.
Right. Like every American in this classroom is somehow responsible for the death of your wife and your daughter and your brother and your nephew. Right? That would be absurd.
I cannot, yeah, exactly. I cannot blame anybody who's in this room or in State College or it'll be wrong. It'll be wrong to generalize. And that's what's happening to Muslims and Islams.
And it's what happens to Americans, right? Around the world. Like Americans are now responsible for what just happened in Afghanistan, right? For things falling apart. So all Americans somehow are responsible or something, right? I mean, it's
after what happened in Afghanistan, there's a lot of fear in Iraq that if the United States pulls out of Iraq, the Iraqi system might topple down because it's very fragile. Yeah. And people are very worried. Really, they're really worried about it right now.
Hey, our 5 guests, do one of you have a question for Bassem? Who has a question for him? One of you 5. Do you have a question for Bassem? Anybody?
So first, thank you for taking the time of your day to discuss this with us. I know it can be very painful, especially when it comes to the effects of what happened with 9/11. So when you discussed earlier how when you spoke with your friend after you heard what happened, what automatically made you think that, you would be paying the price for what a small group of people did?
The United States needed a scapegoat and a revenge to revenge the killing of 3,000 innocent people in these 2 towers. And Afghanistan was first, and I just knew it deep inside that Iraq would be next.
And it's such a painful, you can't, when I was watching video the other day of these attacks on 9/11, when you really watch, it is the horrifying detail of that. I can hardly hold it in my mind and in my heart, how just horrific that was. Bassem, on that morning, I was teaching late that morning, and I had students in class. I was teaching this class, Social 19, and I had students in class who didn't hear from their parents and their siblings and their uncles and so on, and they didn't know if they were alive or they had died. I mean, it's beyond.
Sam, there's a PBS documentary that came out a couple of days ago, and it's a very good piece that I would recommend everybody watch it. I watched it last night. It's amazing work, and it tells you a few ideas and a few things that you never thought about. And please, just anybody who's interested in wanting to know what happened, please watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else up here do you have a question for Bassem? Yeah.
Mr. Bassem, thank you very much for talking to us and sharing your stories and experiences. I know that you went to college here in the U.S. and then you came back here after for the 9/11 memorial or I think in 2018. But how was it like? How was it different going to college here and then coming back after 9/11? Did the like social image for Muslims in general or Iraqis in specific change at like? Were you able to feel that change after 9/11?
Well, yeah, I was in the United States from 1980 to 1988. I really did not, I lived in Michigan, and I really did not have any problems with me being a Muslim in that society. When I came in 2018 and 2019, I was there for like only 1 month. So I cannot, my judgment would not be scientific because I only was here for a month. So I did not encounter any problem either in an airport or in any day of my short stay during these 2 years.
Mhm.
So, but in the 80s, I had no problems.
But you got a lot of love, actually. Right? Yeah, you got a lot of love. You got more love than anybody I've ever seen. Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah. Does anybody have a quick question for Bassem they want to ask? We have just like anyone want to ask him a question? Anyone want to say hi to him? If you watch the video, the class? Yes. Hang on, we have a question here, Bassem.
Okay.
Just see.
So I was wondering, like, you said that you kind of felt like that Muslims were going to pay for the 9/11 attacks. What would have happened if the person that was the terrorist on that plane was not Muslim, if they were white? Do you feel like you still would have been at the root of the cause because the media would twist it in a certain way?
Well, the media can twist any event. Media is very evil sometimes. So you don't know what the event will be and how the media will play it. So yeah, I think after 9/11 and what was happening in Afghanistan, it was obvious that, because the first thing they said that it was the names were Arab, the names were Muslims of the attackers. So you can immediately conclude that there will be an attack on Arabs,
Yeah.
on Muslims. Yeah.
And it just keeps going around, right? It just we
Yeah.
attack one group and another group, and we just keep fighting, and it just will never end until it ends.
Just a vicious cycle,
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. With
Yeah.
can you
Yeah, that's what we
wait?
are working on in wording conversation.
Yeah.
Please join the.
Hey, wait.
that's-
Hang
that's
on
what-
one. Thanks. I appreciate it. Nice job, by the way. Yeah. All right, y'all. Hey, Bassem, we'll be in touch. See you all. See you on Thursday. Hey.